Proslavery Currents in Marx and Engels. May 4, 2019. I live, again. I want to thank in advance all of the 6 people who read this blog. There's still a lot I have to do before I can comfortably call this project finished, among other things an in-depth examination of Karl Ludwig von Haller's body of work, although Doug Smythe could end up beating me to it, an essay on Antoine Blanc de Saint-Bonnet, more tortured wrangling of feudal law, some essays on political economy, Southern pro-slavery thought, the topic of race and sex after Darwinism, ultra-royalist counter-histories of nationalism, etc. etc. So much to do, so little to show for it. My impromptu hiatus has been preoccupied with other concerns. I wonder if Michael Rothblatt, Marcus Montessorsinensis, Quaslakrimas, F.J. Warwick or any of those people are still around. Either way, until I steadily get back on track, a little detour into something I noted previously about having a stagist model of history in a classical, pre-marginalist view of commodity production. Some spooky implications. Marx, Wage Labor and Capital, ch. 2, 1847. Labor power was not always a commodity, merchandise. Labor was not always wage labor, i.e., free labor. The slave did not sell his labor power to the slave owner, any more than the ox sells his labor to the farmer. The slave, together with his labor power, was sold to his owner once for all. He is a commodity that can pass from the hand of one owner to that of another. He himself is a commodity, but his labor power is not his commodity. The serf sells only a portion of his labor power. It is not he who receives wages from the owner of the land. It is rather the owner of the land who receives a tribute from him. The serf belongs to the soil, and to the lord of the soil he brings its fruit. The free laborer, on the other hand, sells his very self, and that by fractions. He auctions off 8, 10, 12, 15 hours of his life, one day like the next, to the highest bidder, to the owner of raw materials, tools, and the means of life, i.e., to the capitalist. The laborer belongs neither to an owner nor to the soil, but 8, 10, 12, 15 hours of his daily life belong to whomsoever buys them. The worker leaves the capitalist, to whom he has sold himself, as often as he chooses, and the capitalist discharges him as often as he sees fit, as soon as he no longer gets any use, or not the required use, out of him. But the worker, whose only source of income is the sale of his labor power, cannot leave the whole class of buyers, i.e., the capitalist class, unless he gives up his own existence. He does not belong to this or that capitalist, but to the capitalist class, and it is for him to find his man, i.e., to find a buyer in this capitalist class. In slavery, one's body is a fixed asset, as opposed to one's labor power being a commodity to be exchanged on the market. Marx's passage seems to imply that the free laborer is basically akin to a whore, whereas the tributary serf retains the dignity of his personhood. Per the Marxian profit equation S, C plus V, the surplus value and rate of exploitation is hence lower, since the labor performed is only marginally above that which is socially necessary, and the means of production are least as opposed to not being had under one's disposal at all. Engels, The Principles of Communism, 1847. The slave is sold once and for all. The proletarian must sell himself daily and hourly. The individual slave, property of one master, is assured an existence, however miserable it may be, because of the master's interest. The individual proletarian, property as it were of the entire bourgeois class which buys his labor only when someone has need of it, has no secure existence. This existence is assured only to the class as a whole. The slave is outside competition. The proletarian is in it and experiences all its vagaries. The slave counts as a thing, not as a member of society. Thus, the slave can have a better existence than the proletarian, while the proletarian belongs to a higher stage of social development and, himself, stands on a higher social level than the slave. The slave has a better existence because he is a thing, and not a free agent in the struggle for existence. On the other hand, the rather vapid historicism rears its head as we are assured that the prole at least has a higher social level, because of the steam engine and mechanical loom, apparently. The serf possesses and uses an instrument of production, a piece of land, in exchange for which he gives up a part of his product or part of the services of his labor. The proletarian works with the instruments of production of another, for the account of this other, in exchange for a part of the product. The serf gives up, the proletarian receives. The serf has an assured existence, the proletarian has not. The serf is outside competition, the proletarian is in it. The serf liberates himself in one of 3 ways. Either he runs away to the city and there becomes a handicraftsman, Or, instead of products and services, he gives money to his lord and thereby becomes a free tenant, or he overthrows his feudal lord and himself becomes a property owner. In short, by one route or another, he gets into the owning class and enters into competition. The proletarian liberates himself by abolishing competition, private property, and all class differences. Ditto serfdom, except add in legal personhood, though Engels doesn't mention manumission of slaves for some reason. How do we get to this promised land of abolishing competition, private property, and all class differences, however? Engels devotes section 18 to proposing a revolutionary course of action. It involves imposing progressive taxation, heavy inheritance taxes, abolition of inheritance through collateral lines, brothers, nephews, etc., forced loans, nationalization of heavy industry, centralization of money and credit into the state, free education, public housing, inheritance rights for bastards. In other words, we're already living in 85 to 90% communism. And yet, the end goal that private property will disappear of its own accord, money will become superfluous, and production will so expand and man so change that society will be able to slough off whatever of its old economic habits may remain, hasn't panned out at all. Weird. On the other hand, in section 24 Engels talks about the so-called reactionary socialists, i.e. aristocratic corporatists. The first category consists of adherents of a feudal and patriarchal society which has already been destroyed, and is still daily being destroyed, by big industry and world trade and their creation, bourgeois society. This category concludes, from the evils of existing society, that feudal and patriarchal society must be restored because it was free of such evils. In one way or another, all their proposals are directed to this end. However, communists must resist them. Why? 3 reasons. 1. It strives for something which is entirely impossible. Look who's talking. 2. It seeks to establish the rule of the aristocracy, the guild masters, the small producers, and their retinue of absolute or feudal monarchs, officials, soldiers, and priests. A society which was, to be sure, free of the evils of present-day society but which brought it at least as many evils without even offering to the oppressed workers the prospect of liberation through a communist revolution. So Engels concedes that it was free of the evils of bourgeois society. Would any contemporary leftist make such a concession? I strongly doubt, but it has at least as many evils of its own which go unspecified. Maybe. It also has the advantage of not being a complete phantasm like liberation through communist revolution. The state has already been communized with no liberatory effect, other than allowing for extreme individual hedonic self-expression, I guess. 3. As soon as the proletariat becomes revolutionary and communist, these reactionary socialists show their true colors by immediately making common cause with the bourgeoisie against the proletarians. More like the proletarians made common cause to become bourgeois. Most of the proles' retirement and pension benefits these days come from pension funds investing in a mixed portfolio of private equity and money market funds. The health of the stock exchange is also the health of the working class. Marx pulled a fast one over everyone. He tricked people into believing that traditionalism was an ultimate progressive ideology, as one of my commenters once said.